Sure. Thanks, Tom. This is Ed Horahan from Bond, Shennick and King, outside counsel to the Rochester Joint School Construction Board. So this is work done under the State Environmental Review Quality Act. And it is not my area of expertise, but luckily my partner, Kathy Bennett, is on, and Kathy handles a lot of environmental matters, legal matters, and very familiar with SECR. She worked closely with our engineering firm, Watts, and she will explain to you the resolution that hopefully is going to be passed a little bit, and what exactly it is that is being asked of the board and what steps were undertaken by Watts and Bond, Shennick and King, along with Savin, to comply with SECR. So go ahead, Kathy. I think you're muted.
Yeah, so struggling with getting those buttons to come up to unmute for some reason this afternoon. Hello, everyone. As Ed said, my name's Kathy Bennett. I've been representing school districts for a number of years now in connection with the environmental quality review process. So it's probably been, I don't know, it was a long time ago, probably at least 24 years ago, where the New York State Education Department said that it was no longer going to perform SECR reviews for school districts, and it made basically all the districts responsible for undertaking the environmental quality review every time a district was proposing one of these capital improvement projects. So as Mr. Richards indicated, this is a very important step, particularly if you don't do it. SED expects this to be done. They expect to see a resolution presented to them before they give whatever, sign off and approval they need to do. So it's what makes it a very important step. So generally the process involves looking at each of the projects at each of the schools that you're undertaking and making an assessment as to whether that project would be classified under SECR as what's called a type 1 action, an unlisted action, or a type 2 action. A type 1 action, there's a list of the various criteria that you would need to satisfy to fall under the type 1 category. Those are typically larger projects. If you're disturbing 10 or more acres, or if you're building a new building, it's 100,000 square feet or greater, or if you're expanding an existing building by 50,000 square feet or greater. So those are bigger projects. You don't have any of those in what we're dealing with here today. Type 2 actions are also listed in the SECR regulations, and I think the list is upwards of 40 different categories of actions that can be considered type 2. Type 2 actions include rehabilitation, it includes replacement, it includes reconstruction, and it includes general activities of a school district, including expansions of up to 10,000 square feet. So there's a lot of categories that school districts can use to categorize their capital improvement projects as type 2 actions. And if something is a type 2 action, it doesn't require any further environmental review process. You basically pass a resolution saying it's on the SECR type 2 list, and you're done. If you're not on the type 2 list and you're not a type 1 action, then you're what's known as an unlisted action. And unlisted actions and type 1 actions, they have to go through a little bit more of a review process. You have to go through an environmental assessment form, and you have to make a determination of environmental significance. Now, in this case, we've determined that all of the actions here that you're undertaking would all fall under that type 2 category. So even though Watts Engineer has prepared an environmental assessment form, and they do that in large part to help make the classification as to whether it's type 1, type 2, or unlisted. So we looked at the forms, we looked at the description of the projects. We've determined, Watts, I think, also determined that they believe they were type 2. We agree with that they fall into the type 2 category. And so we've put together a resolution basically declaring that all of those projects are type 2 for purposes of your compliance with the Environmental Quality Review Act process. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those now.
This is Rich Parent. I'll ask a quick question, and it's more related to maybe phase 1 or phase 2. Have we ever had a proposed action contested by DEC as part of their review of our secra? I mean, I'm just thinking from the memo that Watts Engineers put together that's up now and reading it. It also seems like maybe there's some special consideration between NICEAD and you know, DEC or SHPO on some of these things. So I'm just curious if in phase 1 or phase 2, we've ever run into them saying, no, you know, we're going to need you to actually, you know, not just do an EAF short form, but we're going to need you to do a full environmental assessment or even more.
They've not been contested in phase 1 and phase 2.
Okay.
We had to amend SICR a couple of times
Yeah.
because the board acquired properties, especially around School 54.
Sure.
And also they've acquired property right next to School 50. So at that point, we had to coordinate with them and amend SICR but it was a negative declaration as well.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Papa. That
Sure.
answers it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And we've also kind of discussed that in connection with these projects, that if for some reason down the road something ever did change and the scope of one of these changed and you needed to relook at it, we can always go back in and relook at it and then make whatever modifications are necessary.
I have a question, is there an audit process for type 2? Does the state come in to review what you listed as type 2?
You want to take that, Kathy?
Sure. So SCD will look at this, but typically, you know, they tend to be satisfied with the characterization. You know, the only time SCD is going to come back is if they see, you know, something bigger than the 10,000 square feet in terms of gross floor area, or, you know, if you're doing a lot of ground disturbance outdoors, and then they just want to make sure that it's actually, you know, replacement or repair, and that you're not sort of disturbing green space that wasn't ever used in the past. So I've had them come back and ask questions a couple of times, but very, very rarely. And, you know, generally, if you provide them with the additional information, they're satisfied.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments? I believe the resolution was in the material we circulated and is up on the screen now. Any questions about it? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution as explained and submitted.
This is Rich. I'll move it.
It's been moved. We need a second. I think I heard one. In that case, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Passed. We're getting closer to actually doing something, guys.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your help. Speaking of getting closer to doing something, the next item on our agenda here is the approval of the phase 3 bond underwriter. We have discussed this in some detail. You'll remember that the bond underwriter that had been used in prior cases and with which we were satisfied, unfortunately, went out of the business. And that was Citicorp. So we had to, at the last minute here, go back and find a new bond underwriter. We went out with an RFP, which was shared with you at our last meeting. We received, I think, 10 responses, which was good. We were pleased with that. Those 10 were narrowed down to 3 who made presentations and who were interviewed. The selection committee consisted of Kim Jones, Sean Farr, and myself. We were also assisted in that process with Rick Gansey, who's our financial advisor and has to work closely with the underwriter, with Kim Mitchell and with Pepin Asalam. The recommendation that comes to you on behalf of the committee after the interviews and discussion is that we hire Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo happens to be the least expensive of them under a comparison by about $600,000. But in addition to that, we were particularly impressed with their local experience. They did the bond underwriting for Syracuse, and the actual people who were involved in that are involved in will be involved in providing the service to us. So we feel they're very familiar with the process here in New York, and that will stand us in good stead. You know, we're going to want to start working with them immediately after this meeting to get that part of the plan put together, because the rest of it has been done at least enough now so that we can start working on the financial part of the plan. And the other two members of the committee, would you like to comment, either Kim or Sean?
No, I guess just to echo your point that, you know, they were the least expensive, if you will. But more importantly, they do have the expertise and qualifications to just move the phase forward quickly. So that was a major consideration.
John?
Yeah, all the firms were qualified. I mean, these are highly qualified firms. So we focused in on price and experience, relevant experience to our situation, and then just the quality of service of the team that's put together for this work. So we felt comfortable that Wells Fargo met those.
Yeah, you know, we were pleased that we got as many responses as we did, and as many qualified responses, because we were a little unsure of that. There's a bit of a niche in terms of its the type of work that's being done here, and finding someone who has relevant and recent qualifications in this area. It turned out better than I thought it would, actually. Okay, questions or comments from the assembled group? Hearing or seeing none, I guess, Kim, you can put up the resolution there. So if there are no further questions, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution to hire Wells Fargo as our financial underwriter.
I'll move it, Jesse.
It's been moved. Is there questions or comments, or a second, please?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any further comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, all those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Stands approved. Good, folks. That gets us the last piece of the expertise we need to finish the plan. So that's good news. And they seem very competent and ready to go and with good experience. So we should be able to start making some hay here. Okay, that gets us to the non-action items on our agenda and the fund balance report with Kim.
Thank you, Chairman Richards. Excuse me. We have the overall fund balance at the top. These are the bond funds. We are not currently paying anything from the bond funds. So East has $500 of unused allowance from the Canon agreement. District-wide technology has $4,500,003. Forbes School 4 is $352. The Attorney General settlement is for $330,648. The CPL settlement has $205,421. And the Canon E&O settlement has $200,000 for a total of $5,239,924. After paying the pay requisitions from last month, the RCSD loan balance was $537,961. The current pay requisition has 400 Carlson Road, $5,629.87. Von Schoenig and King for $19,215.50. Savin Engineers for $241,504.09. Lawley Insurance for $2,623. Casco Security Systems for $453.28. Watts Engineering for $91,864.53. That total is $361,290.27 that will be deducted from the RCSD loan. That leaves a fund balance for the RCSD, or excuse me, the RJSCB for $330,648. The program bond funds of $4,503,855. The settlement funds balance of $405,421 for a combined total of $5,239,924. And the RCSD loan balance of $167,671.
76.
$176,671.
They all start looking the same.
We're obviously going to have to make further arrangements with the district to keep going until we can get to the point of doing a band sale with the city. That in terms of getting that squared away, that should occur fairly soon. It may not, the actual lending may not occur soon, but the arrangement should. Because all of the other money there, almost all of the other money there relates to phase 2 and is not available for the work on phase 3. Okay, questions or comments on this or for Kim? Okay, program manager report, Pepin?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The program management team has updated the proposed phase 3 overall schedule that we reviewed with the board at last month's meeting. From that update, we've extracted the key phase 3 milestones we believe are extremely critical for the successful implementation of the program. Those milestones are shown on a one-page summary that I would like, I guess, Terry Locante, because I know Rolly is not feeling well. I should have said that earlier. And he lost his father last week. So I'm going to ask you, Terry, to go through that milestone schedule with help from Rick, and Rolly can fill in as possible. So Kim, if you could put that schedule, yes, please.
Shrink it down a little bit.
Yeah.
So just to give a highlight of what the colors and the representations are, the red bars in front are the design durations. The red diamond represents the commissioner's final approval at SED. The empty diamond is the award of the construction contracts, and the green bar would be the construction duration. The yellow boxes above the design are the intermittent reviews that SED needs to make during the design process. As you recall in the legislation, at each submission, schematics, 25%, 50%, 75%, and then of course final are submissions where they're going to be looking at the design and the costs to make sure that we're within the criteria within the legislation before they allow us to move to the next step at each project. And then the blank long bar above the construction bar represents the swing space or the occupation for the students. The first one up top, we've done these in order where you've got Martin Luther King School 9 on top, Wilson, then Franklin, East, Edison, and then Douglas. Now, one thing to point out here with Douglas is that it is sharing swing space with Wilson. So even if we're able to design it early and award construction contracts early, can't move kids out to do the substantial amount of the renovation until Wilson finishes in order to give the students a place to go for swing space. We are looking at if there's any small amount of renovation that can be done while kids are, you know, at the tail end of the school year while kids are still in the building. But that's still, you know, we need to define the scope a little better as we get further into the design process to really shape that out.
So what Terry just reviewed is that there are about 6 time segments for SCD submission, review, and approval that are required per the phase 3 legislation, each of the projects. So those yellow time segments that Rolly started drafting by hand first until Rick and Terry put this together show almost 6 times 6 projects. That's 36 reviews. So everything has to go perfectly. And the consequence is if there's a delay in any of those time segments, then the overall program somewhat gets delayed. So we just wanted to highlight that for the board. And at the bottom of the sheet, we show a legend of the time submissions that are required, leading to full SCD approval. And that little legend showing the diamonds that Terry was showing and time segments are shown at the bottom right side of this chart. Any questions?
I think you might also mention or point out that we're trying here with this schedule to also meet the school schedule. In other words, moving the significant number of kids out of one school and into the other as swing space. We're trying to do that in a way that doesn't occur in the middle of the year as much as possible.
Yes, and that's very important. And also you'll see that 2 of the projects do not involve swing spaces, East and Edison, although the preference would be to move everybody out to avoid the complications we lived through at East. But the reality is we're doing a lot of infrastructure at East. And I think the performing arts wing, Rolly, is the one that we're focusing on. So we don't see a real need to move the kids out of East. But and thank you, Chairman, for raising the school schedule as well. Mr. Perrin, you had a question?
I just had a couple of quick ones. The first one is CD stand for construction documents? Or what is the CD after?
Yeah, construction doc, yes, sir.
Just didn't know, because I mean, generally, for a lot of us,
Sure.
you know, you get the preliminary design, detailed design,
Right.
you know, your PS&E, your, okay.
Yes, we just use their jargon.
Yeah, that works great. And then the other question I had was, and I apologize if we've gone over this as part of phase 2, but do we have any, you know, even tacit concurrence from NICEAD SCD that they can turn these things around and the timeframes we've asked them for? Because I mean, it's all hurry up, but then it comes, wait. So,
Well, that point is why Terry and Rick did a contingency schedule that said what happens if SED applies their traditional process as is currently posted on their website in terms of durations. But when you look at the program from that perspective, and our most critical project is the one at Wilson, because that swing space has to be made available before Douglas can proceed. If you applied their traditional their average review times at this point in time to our projects, it would have the net effect of pushing the end date, not in the spring of 2031, but out by almost 3 years.
Okay.
And that is obviously unacceptable and would require a major fire drill and modification of legislation, a number of things. So that is why we're trying to pre-meet, if you will, with SED. We haven't been successful to date, but with the submission of the strategic plan, hopefully in April, we will be able to set up such a meeting, walk them through the recommended and the what if scenario. And by virtue of coming to concurrence on process, wherein we are stipulating in the AE agreements, for example, that they cannot even make a submission nor get paid for that submission until they certify with their detailed estimate that it is 95% of the MCA cap. We will be doing independent cost estimating as well, but nonetheless, everybody's got to be held accountable at every step of the way, because this can very easily get unraveled with anyone just being out of step. But the clear fact remains that if SED, and this is why we are identifying on the computer-based critical path schedule, when the slots and when the design would be ready for SED. Obviously, the details augmentative as the construction documents get more developed, but the early reviews certainly should be accomplishable in 2 weeks, particularly on an agreed schedule basis. The final review, we know is going to be a much heavier lift. So even in our base schedule, we've applied a significantly longer period of time for that.
Yeah, you asked about our phase 1 and phase 2 experience. In phase 1, we were able to meet with them in Albany, do a pitch turn, and walk out without permits. In phase 2, we were able to almost do the same for the first half of the program. The second half, again, we worked with the project manager at the time, Sigrid Koons. And, you know, the timeline was anywhere between, I would say, 2 weeks to a month. But for this phase, I believe we are allocating about 60 days.
We have more like 70 days in total for the scheduled reviews for each project by SED.
Right. Well,
now I will say there is a further refinement that we will do in detail, that we are going to, if at all possible, be certain no 2 projects of ours are at SED at the same time.
Right.
Okay, that's a further refinement, but
we'll work on that.
We are in the ball game that we know the base schedule as proposed can work.
Yeah, so Rolly and Terry and Rick got a little bit more conservative. I asked for 60 days, they put 70, so I think we gave them enough time to respond.
Rich, you put your finger on a potential problem here. Clearly, we've got to work together with SED and the district and come to some accommodation here that makes this project work. That's one of the reasons we've been doing all of this work on the scheduling. You know, we're doing so much of this work in advance because we want to make sure that everybody understands where we are. And, you know, we don't just get in an argument about who's doing what. We are able to work on a common schedule here.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is even feasible or would even be worthwhile, but I know when I had clients that had things particularly, you know, significant, in this case, federal regulations, I would give them a cover sheet that part of my cover sheet was almost a checklist to say, you had this requirement, here's where it is. You can just go to this page, or you can see this particular drawing in the plan set and you're taken care of. So if there's a non-conforming feature, we fixed it, you know, and here's what we did. So it sounds like you guys already have some way of like, hey, you brought this up in C, so now that we're in D, there's how it got handled.
Right.
Okay.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you.
So the next document, Kim, if you could scroll through that one, is a financial summary. It's a monthly financial summary report that shows the initial budget allocation for each of the 6 projects and incidental planning expenditure spread across each of the projects based on the RCSD loans that Mrs. Jones, the chairman, and Kim Mitchell mentioned earlier. The loans received by the RJSCB from the school district. Until a ban is issued by the city of Rochester on behalf of the district, and until long-term debt is issued by the RJSCB through the general obligation serial bonds, these amounts are listed as placeholders for now until funds are encumbered and until contracts are issued. So you look at the bottom, you'll see some paid to date amounts that we've put across. If you could put the cursor there at the bottom of the page. Yep, you're right. So we kind of allocated the expenditures, the 1 million throughout each of the projects. What I'd like to also mention is that for the debt to align with the receipt of state aid, and Mr. Farr knows that very well, the program will most likely need to do 2 years of ban in talking to the financial advisors to reduce capitalized interest. This means that borrowing in August 26 for the long-term debt versus the 2025 long-term debt that we originally estimated. So I think we may be forced to do a ban in August of 26 instead of.
2 bans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So and we'll talk about that. So right now, so what I'd like to show is that there is a reporting tool we'd like to review with the board on a monthly basis. If the board is okay with it, that's what we'll present on a monthly basis. If there are no questions here, the next topic for the PM report is regarding the master plan development for phase 3. The school district's leadership was provided an initial draft of the plan with all 4 volumes for review on March 1st, as scheduled. From our perspective, volumes 1, 3, and 4 drafts are in very decent shape. Volume 2 is still being developed and will also be in good shape in about 3 to 4 weeks, now that Wells Fargo has been retained by the board as a bond underwriter for this phase of the program. In the past 2 weeks, we've been working with the school district's finance department, Watts, SWBR, and Regency of Capital Markets Advisors in developing a preliminary aid versus debt and local share model for phase 3. This information, I think the Chairman Rich has already mentioned that, and the updated cash flow estimate that I'll be working on this week will be provided to Wells Fargo early tomorrow or tonight, if I get a chance to do it tonight, so we can drop the debt service estimates into the financial plan being developed. So that's what we're working on right now. Other component of the strategic plan development and considerations this team made include several assumptions on the instructional space review forms that need to be confirmed by the district's instructional curriculum department and the SED. Our calculation of the building aid units versus the available maximum cost allowances assumed a double MCA for all 6 projects. The legislation allows for it, and the only way we can get to this 95% aidability individually is to consider a double MCA for all 6 projects, especially for East and Edison as well. So we are very excited that we can achieve that if we're allowed to do double MCA for all 6 projects. School 9 is a challenge. We're still doing a lot of work with Regency to see how we can make the 95%. One thing we'll do, Sean, is to see if we could download the soft cost from 9 and spread some of the incidentals towards other projects, secondary schools that have capacity. So that's what we'll work on. But until, we get into the nitty gritty, right now, it's a bunch of versions we're exercising. We would like, obviously, the engagement of specialty consultants to start right away. We're very excited. The board has selected Wells Fargo now as an underwriter. We'll be working with them soon. We will be as excited when the RFPs are released for the phase 3A architects. I think Rolly touched up on that a little earlier. We will need the bond and insurance review consultants on board sooner than later. And Rick Stoffel is working on something, either extending them, or if general counsel says it has to be RFP'd, we'll put an RFP together. But we've been working with Lolly for the past 14 years, 15 years. If there are some savings by not going through the RFP process and you're allowed to extend, we'll explore that as well with you and BSK. Other RFPs would like to draft is the program-wide environment for the program, the energy consultant, food service, commissioning authority, consultancy services. So all that work is, in process. We're working on those during rainy days, downtime. And we're also working on our phase 3 procedures manual, which I believe you, Terry, are working arduously with Siobhan and Rick Stoffel on.
We're about halfway through it.
Very good. So that's where we are in terms of our program management report, and ready for any questions you, Mr. Chairman, or the board has.
Pepin, the board, this board, is going to have to approve this master plan along with the city and the district. We're going to have to start thinking about how we get this information to the board. Those of you who have not been through this before, this is a large volume and a lot of detail of information here. And so you needn't review it in minute detail. We don't expect the board members to have responsibility for the math that's, for instance, that's being done here, but we're going to want to give you an opportunity to look at it in some format that you can be comfortable that you're willing to support it. So Pepin, you and I are going to have to get together here and figure out a mechanism for doing that. And I think we're going to have to start soon with parts of it.
Yes.
If we leave this thing till the end, it's unmanageable, basically. So I was looking at for instance, volume 1 today, which has a lot of the work that we did before to test fit, and also the educational plan. And it's a wide, what, 8.5 by 17, and it's probably 150, 160 pages long. So it's a lot of information.
Yes, it's certainly a lot. Volume 2 will be extremely important to review. Volume 3, that's the diversity plan. We got that from Enshin, and I think we're in pretty decent shape with that one. The forms were attached. Volume 4, a lot of appendices and the worksheets, and where we pretty much came up with some of the documents. And Rolly gave me a note that we'll need,
which I can start
to
with that.
summarize all significant assumptions with what Chairman mentioned to me today.
Yes, in the, I think it's right at the end or just before the executive summary in the draft strategic plan, the major assumptions have been transposed into guiding principles, which are obvious and upfront with SED. For example, the double MCAs on all projects, those kind of procedural matters, the criticality of the schedule and SED reviews. So it is identified, but at a working level, there's a whole nother level of process, if you will, that I expect to come out once we are able to engage with SED and talk about, here's what we need, what can you handle, and what indeed is a way that you like to see it compared to what we've done in the past, if there are any differences. So we are certainly sensitive that there have to be working assumptions, and we likewise sensitive that all the parties have to agree with, for which the district has reviewed our guiding principles and took no exception to any. We obviously will expect SED up front to want to look at those as well.
Where are those principles now? Are they in the?
They are
section?
in volume 1, and it's yeah, but
Uh,
That's okay. They're in volume 1.
page 4.
Okay, good. I looked at it. I didn't realize what I was looking at there, but that sounds like a good way to do it. So good.
We want to be transparent.
Yeah. Okay, other questions or comments from the assembled group?
Ed, one, have we been provided as board members links to these documents to, are they in a position where we can start to take a look at, like, volume 2 or one of these other things yet, or is that?
That's what I was talking about. No is the answer. We've just recently gotten to the point where it makes any sense, but Pepin and I will come up with a mechanism for starting the board through the process of and we'll make sure you get the ability to get exposure to it.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't know if there was a draft prior to the 29th, but it makes sense that the board wants the Board of Education one.
Yeah, so, they've been submitted to the school district. And we have a meeting, internal meeting Thursday of this week. Sit down with the superintendent and gather any comments, concerns, whatever, any feedback. It's also, on pace to then go to the March 28th Board of Education. For approval. And then it needs to go to the city. I don't know what the city schedule was. And then ultimately, this board. So this board is the last hurdle, but.
But we got to get started sharing this stuff now.
Yeah.
Because there's too much here to wait till the end of the process.
Going to the March meeting?
March.
The one item I didn't mention, Chairman Richards, is that we developed a draft PowerPoint presentation for you and the vice chair and other board members to look at and edit. So once you're okay with that PowerPoint, then you can, adjust it, and if it's adequate or satisfactory, then you can give it to the superintendent to present with Chairman Richards. And thank you for starting that. I think it was a good document.
Yeah, in that document, there's a bunch of dates at the end of it where certain things are going to happen. Are those agreed to dates, or are they just proposals?
Strongly proposed.
Proposed dates, subject to your review and the district's review.
Yeah, and not just the two of us. I mean, the city's involved and a lot of people are involved.
City as well. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think Pepin, even if we make some minor changes to it, I think it would be a good idea to share that PowerPoint with the board. So after we're through here, that's a good way to get started, actually, with us sharing this information. So let's share that with the board, even if it gets modified a little bit between now and whenever it's finally used.
Yeah. So you just want the PowerPoint, or you want the 4 volumes shared as well?
No, the PowerPoint. I want to talk to you about the 4 volumes, because
Okay.
we got to figure out how we ought to handle that. Maybe there's no choice but to just send it to them, but
Right.
I feel like we're blitzing them, you know, and it's not fair, so. But let's start with the PowerPoint and then we'll get something on the volumes out shortly.
Yeah, well, if you give me 2 to 3 weeks, we'll put that financial plan in a pretty good shape because the RJSCB is obligated by the statute to directly submit that volume to the state controller, whereas the school district is responsible or obligated to submit everything to SED. So if you give me a couple of weeks, I can really work hard with Gansey and Wells Fargo to give you a more complete document.
Yeah, well, okay, I think I'm gonna try to get volume 1 out before then, though.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Because that's really substantially complete.
yes,
And it gives people a little sense of the magnitude of the planning effort here.
right.
I did have one other question.
Sure.
I mean, I think you mentioned about various consultants, environmental, energy related. Are those contracts, would we, or do they need to be mutually exclusive, or could you have a firm that's multi-service and you know, when you mention environmental and energy, sometimes those two go together.
Right.
Not necessarily the environmental side, like we're talking just here for SECR and
Right.
whatever you might have to do, but has that happened? Has that been allowed? I'm just thinking there's a lot of large firms out there that might have various lines of business or service markets where they could do multiple.
Absolutely, they can do
Yeah.
multiple. What we do, we send separate RFPs.
Yep.
But they can certainly submit on
Okay.
several at the same time. We normally send them separately because we
Mhm.
kind of ramp up a bit slowly based on need.
Yeah.
But
You don't want to be reviewing them all at the same, so the proposed,
well,
they come in.
yeah,
So,
well,
yeah.
we can certainly work together on this and
Oh, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I've deferred to you guys as how it goes. I was just, you know, like I said, I was just asking.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
And just lastly, on volume 3, it does have the ICO's recommendations for the business utilization numbers and the workforce utilization. Put a placeholder in there. I just want to talk to council about how we address goals so we don't deal with the issue that we had in phase 1 and 2, with contractors' non-compliance and the definition of a goal. So there's just a placeholder there to council weigh in on the wording of it.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Before I forget about it, Pep, in that last page in the PowerPoint that you're gonna circulate, you gotta put proposed new dates there.
Okay.
Because you don't have that agreed to yet.
Okay.
Other than that, let's go.
Got it. I'll do
Okay,
that.
folks, anything else to come before our assembled group?
Chairman Richards, I'd just like to point out that the April 8th meeting is going to be
Okay.
moved to April 9th due to the eclipse. So that will be April 9th.
We decided not to compete with the eclipse. Not that you wouldn't rather, you know, come to our meeting, but
We could have
If I gotta be here in person,
the eclipse.
getting through that traffic.
Yes.
So April 9th. Okay.
okay, hearing or seeing nothing else, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Get some medicine. Which one?